Hello again. Welcome back to our corporate immigration series in Africa. I'm Andreas. I'm a Senior Director for Africa and Europe at IBN Immigration Solutions. We are part of the Envoy Global law firm. And today I am joined by my dear colleague, Melissa.
Hi everyone, I'm Melissa Moses. I'm a Senior Immigration Consultant at IBN, a company of Envoy Global. And today we'll be discussing immigration in Morocco.
Yes, we're turning our attention to Morocco, a country where basically the employment contract, I think, is really the permit, right? It's quite an interesting one. So you get this wrong, and then the whole immigration process is wrong, right? But anyway, let's talk about Morocco. Morocco's economy is doing very well. North Africa, proximity to Europe, they're doing very well in manufacturing, renewables, automotive, finance. So there's quite a lot of interest. So let's jump into it. So how does the immigration system work in very short?
So the immigration system in Morocco may come across as quite complicated, but they actually, like very similar to South Africa, have multiple work visa routes. And in terms of the way they organize themselves from an immigration perspective is actually quite seamless in terms of comparison to other countries. So I would say that the way they organize themselves is actually quite structured.
Okay.
And I think that they do actually consider things like internal transfers and assignments where most other African countries don't.
All right, so let's jump right into it. So I'm a company in Europe. I want to have a project in Morocco, or I want to set up my own company there. I want to transfer a couple of employees into Morocco. What are the options? What are the routes?
Yeah. So I think first and foremost, we would have to identify what your exact plan in Morocco is, right? Because as I mentioned before, there are multiple options, not many, but there are multiple options in terms of bringing a foreigner into Morocco. So if you were setting up your own company in Morocco, it's a legally registered entity in country, and you are wanting to employ foreigners directly into this entity, you would need to apply for what is called the ANAPEC route. So the ANAPEC route is where there needs to be local labor market testing.
Okay.
First and foremost. And this needs to then be submitted to ANAPEC. And once ANAPEC has approved the fact that you want to bring a foreigner into country, because there are no local Moroccans that qualify for the position, they will then issue you with a certificate, and that certificate then gets included into the work permit.
So that pre-approval, the employer has to drive, obviously.
That's correct.
Okay,
yes,
so that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. And then if we are looking at transferring someone
Yes.
from a mother company abroad, you would then go with what is called a ICT or Intra-Company Transfer.
Okay.
So in that instance, the labor market testing is not applicable because you are transferring someone from your mother company to your entity in Egypt.
And the labor market testing at ANAPEC, basically, is that now the stamped employment contract? When they stamp it, is that then the permission, or where does the stamped employment contract come in?
So
or is it a step after ANAPEC?
Correct.
Yeah.
So the ANAPEC is basically just the approval from the labor market testing, and they are then issuing you with a certificate that gets included into the work permit application, which is actually just your employment contract being submitted to the ministry. And then once it's approved, your work contract gets stamped.
Okay. And the residents, do they have a residence requirement?
Yes, they do. So in Morocco, you would have to have what is called a residence card or a work card, typically, we would call it. So once your work contract or work permit, for easier terms of referencing, is approved, you would then need to go ahead and apply for the residence permit, or the residence card, which is typically issued at the police or the commune closest to where you reside.
So the steps are really: the employer applies for ANAPEC, labor market testing. Labor market testing says 2 thumbs up. Then employment contract to ministry says yes. Then foreigner comes in, correct?
Correct.
And then foreigner obviously applies for residence.
That's correct, because the foreigner actually needs to be present on the day of application for residence, and they would also need to be present in order to collect the residence card once it's available.
Okay. And then coming to ESG, is there any ESG dimension in Morocco?
So yes, I would say definitely with the local labor market testing with ANAPEC, Morocco protects its local foreign workers in that aspect. And I think companies also can frame this quite positively by showing the foreign employee or uplifting the foreign employee in terms of local labor to transfer skills when it comes to the intra-company transfer.
Okay. So quite similar to other African countries then. So what are the common red flags?
So I would say from an HR or employer perspective is that they don't reach out to us or the immigration provider early enough. I would also say that the ANAPEC could be considered a bit of a red flag, because if there is sufficient positions within Morocco, then it could obviously pose a problem for the local employer, because they would be recommended first to employ a Moroccan before employing a foreigner.
I recall we had one case, I think, where a European company wanted to send somebody on an ICT route, basically, but they didn't do the unpack before, because usually, well, you don't necessarily need it, and then it was needed, and that basically set them back, well, months rather than weeks. So that was quite bad.
Yeah, I think it's quite important for the company to also understand the route and the timelines, because that in essence would help them avoid these hurdles later on.
And costs, not a big factor, no?
I wouldn't. If we compare it to other African countries, I would also say that Morocco is quite moderate in terms of pricing.
Okay. So what are our 3 takeaways, Melissa, for Morocco if you want to move staff into it?
So I would say our 3 takeaways would definitely be: understand the immigration route that you need to take, in terms of whether it would be an ANAPEC application or whether it would be intra-company, for example. Also to definitely start the process quite early, just in case of the labor market testing and ANAPEC taking longer than expected. And then to be sure that, you know, if you're doing an intra-company transfer, that there is some sort of skills transfer for the local labor market.
Okay. So Morocco in, I don't know, it's 10 minutes, 8 minutes, 7 minutes. So I hope you enjoyed that.